Welcome to Café Grit. I'm your host, Beth Anne Campbell. This is the place to go when you've got the hankering for purpose, the taste for fulfillment, and you're tired of living the rat race. And I hope we're going to talk about being tired of living the rat race today. I'm over the moon, have a very special guest in the grit seat today, my dear friend and former colleague, corporate extraordinaire, Jerry Gray. Jerry, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
Thanks, Beth. I am super excited to talk to you. And it's kind of funny. We were talking earlier about when I listened to your podcast. And I have to say, I've got one foot in retirement. It's not to say that
I hear you.
it's not to say that I'm not, doing my job and these sorts of things, but you get a little more seasoned. You start thinking about when I could set all these things aside and do the things that I really want to work on. But when you were talking about some of these situations
in my last podcast,
I was like, you know what? Turns out I'm still super passionate about organizational management,
I
about
love
leadership,
it.
and about I've always enjoyed mentoring people, and I've always want to try to help people if I can navigate sort of the corporate world, set aside probably bad preconceived notions of, especially more for younger people, because they usually they don't know what they're in for.
Yeah.
They don't
and
know
I'm probably spoiling it a little bit with my stuff too. Like, young people don't listen to this. This is only for the old curmudgeons that have gotten jaded with their corporate world.
Well, it turns out I've learned a few things, and I try to arm young people, like, and we can even talk about that. How do you have that first conversation with your boss about what's it take to get recognized around here? I tell you what, the worst thing, probably one of the worst things young people think is, if I just work hard and keep my nose to the grindstone, I'll be recognized for my efforts and then I'll get promoted. I go, let's dispel that fantasy right away.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that and so much more. I'm actually so excited because I have somebody on, because there are so many people, and you just said you had your foot in retirement. And I talked to so many people who contact me on the side because they're so fearful of saying anything against anything corporate because they're so afraid. So it's so refreshing to have somebody on who is like just willing to, in a professional way, but kind of call out, look, this is the reality, and here's some things that can help you. Go ahead.
And I want to say, when we worked together, it's when I
Many
first
moons ago.
yeah, fun flies when you're doing time. Many years ago is when I really first came up sort of the phrase, don't be too fond of your job.
Yeah.
Always. And the type of organization we worked in.
Yeah.
I would, I actually somewhat became not just jaded about the organization, but jaded about the employees, because it's like, Dave, I use the metaphor. You're part of the crew. You're part of the ship. You're doing your 100 years before the mast as part of Davy Jones' crew. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be that way. If you've got marketable skills, speak your mind.
Oh my God, yes.
If you don't, okay, maybe you better keep your head down.
Oh my gosh. This is I so many questions. I mean, do you think that what was I going to ask you? Oh, well, it'll come back to me anyway. So let me just let the audience know, just for a little bit of background. Jerry and I worked at the same company. I don't know, like, did I meet you, like, maybe it was got to be over 20 years ago, because we met in a Toastmasters club for this company.
I left in 2009.
2009. So yeah, and I had started in 2000. So it must have been somewhere in that early 2000s so we've known each other, gone way back.
Well, I think I knew who you were, but
Doesn't
we worked
everybody?
at different parts of the organizations, although we were both in IT,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't see. I don't think we ever worked directly together, but it was more in the Toastmasters, which I
Yeah.
still remember some of your fantastic speeches. We'll maybe we'll touch upon that later. Um, it-
Oh, and you were
oh
doing an introduction, and I guess I should, if
yeah,
people want
Jerry, why
to
don't you
know
introduce yourself to the
a
world?
little bit about me, uh,
Yeah,
old
tell us.
old curmudgeon. I do have a PhD, and while that does mean piled higher and deeper, as I've been informed, I do know some things about some stuff. I've been in IT since 1982.
Wow,
So you can imagine I've seen some tech come and go.
I'm sure. Did you work with the
And
cards, the cards that I always hear about? That was a little
oh
bit before
yes.
my time.
Oh yeah. I have emptied a bit bucket.
Oh geez, wow.
So that's not
Okay.
just a metaphor, that was an actual thing.
Okay, youngins, go and Google that because I barely know what that is. So
So but it's so yeah. So my PhD was in organizational management with a specialization in IT management. My graduate degree was in MIS. My undergrad was CIS and management. Uh, I was also in the military. So in my PhD program, you had an opportunity to do sort of for your coursework, sort of a capstone project, specialty, and I did leadership.
oh
So I'm
nice.
very uh, this passionate about this
Yeah.
topic, which led to me reaching
You're
out.
classing up my podcast. I'm telling you right now, I might feel a little guilty, but I will still probably drop a few F bombs. I will just warn you.
Uh,
No,
feel free.
no,
We're going to talk about some shit today.
we're gonna talk some shit about corporate bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my question. So you were talking about kind of the youth and this message of, this might not be your forever job. I mean, you and I kind of came from probably the last of the era of, and even a lot of industries when probably we were entering were not so much, but we were the last of the era that could come into a job and think, oh, I'm going to spend the rest of my life here. But the younger generation, oh my God, they don't stay
Yeah.
anywhere very long at all.
I'm old enough to actually have recognized that that notion was probably halfway out the door by the time
Yeah,
I came to work
yeah,
in the same place that you did. Shortly after I joined, they got rid of the pension, which I've since
yep.
learned. I've now that I've actually filed my retirement paperwork from that organization and drawing on that money. And when you're younger, you don't even think about that far ahead about what a good benefit that is.
Yeah.
And now young people, they only get the 401k. But so I started working when I was 12, but let's, for the sake of argument, talk about when I first
Yeah,
entered the workforce,
sure. Yeah.
when I got a check and not cash.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so in fact, I joined the Air Force because I couldn't get a job in Michigan. You couldn't get a job without experience. You couldn't get experience with the job. I didn't go to college straight away. I
Same.
was being a hippie,
Yep.
but you had the stagnation that looks a lot like today of the tail end of the Carter administration, where you had no job growth, unemployment was issue. First time that inflation had sort of hit double digits, and so it was a tough economic downturn where you had some of the big companies in the
Yeah.
US where you had that sort of the loyalty thing too.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to work for Ford, GM, Chrysler,
Oh yeah.
and I'm working there forever. I'm going to go to work for GE, and I'm going to go work for them forever. Procter and Gamble, all these great big companies with great benefits. But then what happened? You had a severe economic downturn. They started kicking these people to the curb. You even had in countries like Japan, where they were famous for lifetime employment, super loyal. And even over in Japan, you saw them start kicking people to the curb. And that's when people started to recognize, oh, maybe this company, well, my grandfather was a founding member of the AFL-CIO, so, or the United Auto Workers. So we know that the man was not necessarily there for you. They were there for you when it behooved them. And but in the 80s, you had this kind of revisiting, I think. So this is a fun phenomenon more among the white collar worker, the professional staff, right? That, you can get kicked to the curb. There's
Oh
no
yeah.
loyalty here. But then the funny thing happened. A couple years went by, and these organizations started finding out, hey, that loyalty thing? Turns out that's a two-way street. And if you
Oh
treat people
yeah.
poorly,
Well, an interesting twist on that too is that I think it's the two-way street thing, but I think a lot of people start off or did start off in those positions with those big companies. I know I did, thinking I'm going to be here for the rest of my career. And I liked it at first. And then when it became bad, because it always becomes bad. I mean, it's just cyclical, right? Sometimes maybe not as bad as some places, worse than others, but people will leave, right? So that loyalty comes into play. But then there are a lot of people that won't leave, and only
totally.
because of loyalty and fear, because there's loyalty and then there's also fear. And I see this with a lot of people that have 20, 30 or more years where they don't think that they are marketable. They just think, what am I going to do? In spite of me, for many of them, saying you've got an amazing skill set. And I know for myself, it took me 5 years from the day I wanted to, when I wrote my book, Where the Hell is My Bacon, those years to when I left. It took 5 years for me to get up the courage to go. So I know there's a little bit of that longevity is based
Like
in,
dating.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you've so I was a bartender in college, super on the working class social hierarchy. Bartender's pretty close to the top of the pyramid.
Sure.
And even though I had some skills, let's say, and uh, and then I got married, and and I was married for 8 years, and then we got divorced, and then I had to go date again, and I was like
Mm-hmm.
completely out of my
Yeah.
element. And I was still, you think about it, I got married when I was 25, I got divorced when I was
Yeah.
33, not old
Yeah. Did
completely.
you find when you got back into dating, kind of as analogous to corporate, did you find that it was like just really hard at first, but eventually, at the second date, the third date, the fourth person, it became easier, or no?
No, but so the other thing I wanted to say too about in an organization where when things aren't going well, there's a saying, certainly in the leadership circles, there's an awareness that if things go bad south, your best people leave first.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Well,
you go,
that's the catch, right? Is that the people leave, and then maybe some of your good people stay, but then they have to take on the burden. I'm already hearing it from, a podcast company. I'll call it podcast company, where people are now having to take on the burden of the people that are either leaving or got let go. And some of them I never thought in a million years would leave, and they're saying, I'm thinking about leaving. And you're right. They're the good people.
yeah, and so if especially more so, you have to be talented, but you do have to have marketable skills. So if you've got a skill set that happens to be hot at the time, well, you could think about like cybersecurity.
Right.
Cybersecurity has been a hot career field for the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
And if you've got cyber skills, they will put up with absolutely zero shenanigans.
True.
But I was thinking too about the organization, and I was a member of the political action committee at the time, and that was I really enjoyed working with those people. But one time we were having a meeting, and there was a tornado warning, so the meeting got held up for a moment, and we went down to the basement. I had a moment to have a one-on-one conversation with the head of HR at the time. And the conversation went something like this, because in IT with this professional staff, we had been really bucking the system where they had this sort of thing that you had to have a certain time in your job, you had to have a certain time in your company to get promoted.
Yeah.
And I said, that's not very agile. And I said, that's actually surprisingly for the, exempt folks, not subject to union rules.
Yeah.
Surprising sort of perspective on how you're going to treat people. And on the other side of the coin, so if I've got a mover and shaker, if I've spotted talent, I want to grab them, but I want to make sure that they are recognized, compensated
100%.
for what they bring to the table. At the other end of that scale, for a while, my brother worked with us.
What?
He was in charge of the Oracle financials. And he had a gentleman that was absolute dead weight.
Mm.
And my brother came up with a thing. He goes, who knew you didn't have to go to work? Dude didn't show up to work for a month. And he was like,
He's not my brother. Oh, wait.
I
Yes, he
fired
is.
the guy. And he goes, the next day, they brought him back. I can't just fire somebody. This got to be coordinated with management and HR. So that was an eye opener. But then they didn't have my brother's back. And so this guy was so bad. So at that time, the IT organization was just north of 400 people. And I said, I'm not going to. So I had this conversation with HR, and I go, I don't want to go all. I forget the guy who started the layoffs at GE, where you just 10% gone every year, 10% gone.
Right.
I go, I get that. We want to, try to work with people. And I'm certainly a person that was all about mentoring, empowerment, leadership, getting the most out of people. I live for that stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But I go, and even teaching online, something I learned, you can't reach everybody.
Yeah.
And I go, could we get rid of the bottom 1%? I go, in our organization of 400 people, could we let 4 people go? Like the worst of the worst. And I go, you're going to see addition by subtraction. I said, because I promise you, there's people out there that are covering for these folks, doing extra work. And I go, if you got rid of 4 people, I go, not only would you've eliminated some of the burden on the people that were doing their job anyways. I go, wouldn't you send a little bit of a message to
It's
the?
very interesting, Jerry, because I don't disagree with you. I think I mentioned in the podcast, like, there are probably, the mandate at this the podcast company, our company was across the board for one criteria that was that is kind of subjective. And I even said, there are probably people that are not on an improvement plan that everybody wishes would go away. There always are. And it's a small number, but you're exactly right. You get rid of those people, and it's a little shocking at first, but then people go, you know what? My life is so much better right now.
Oh, they let Bob go. Oh,
Oh, darn.
God.
Which which is not to be callous of Bob, but if Bob is not living up, then sometimes that's the best thing for Bob is to get him a better fit somewhere else.
But and I have a little sense of this, from the other day, is we could talk about employee performance reviews, and
Oh, please
I,
let's, because I do hate
my
them for many
disdain,
reasons.
my
Yeah, so
disdain for
you
them.
you said you don't like them either. Why don't talk to me about why you don't like employee performance reviews.
So a couple reasons. If you are a manager, a leader of people, and you're not talking to your team and not knowing how they're doing, you, lady or gentleman, are an asshole.
Right. Amen.
You're a shit kebab and you're bad at your job. And if anybody listens to this and goes, I haven't talked to anybody on my team in a month, do yourself a favor. Go find a different job because you're
Right.
not good at yours.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that. Yeah. And by the way, I'm stealing shit kebab for future use.
we
Yeah,
usually
I
use
totally
that
am. I'm with you,
referring
Jerry,
to our
man.
dogs.
I wrote a whole list of because I started thinking, why do I hate performance reviews? I had so many reasons, and the first reason I wrote is I communicate with my team regularly. I don't need to do performance reviews because we're in communication all the time.
Yeah. And so the other thing is, so I have a systems, not goals approach to life. So my system, so generally you could gloss over and say at a high 50,000 foot level, my system is one of continual learning. And so, it's sort of dumb when, the organization that I recently was with says, you got to have two self-improvement goals. And that could be like taking a class or something like that. And 1 year in my performance review, I wrote down all the books that I had read. It was like 13 that year. I went on this real tear where I'd read a book for enjoyment, read a nonfiction book, and then think about, and I'd always learn things about how to apply them to the job. Systems are hard for managers that don't get it, because what happens is you'll have goals on your journey. Well, you'll have touch points, milestones on the journey, but there's things you'll discover, but there's no hard and fast. It's hard to put a metric to it.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's a big one.
You can't
That's a big one. Oh, yeah, that's so.
can't
Are you
manage
me? Are you me?
without.
Because I've been saying that for years. Like, how do you? We're not call center people. How do I metric like how somebody whose job it is to like manage systems in IT and work on projects? How do I metric that with when everything is out of their control? They don't have any response type of stuff. They don't. It's really hard. Hard to give them a
Yeah.
smart goal, even if you're into
So
smart goals.
we evolved for the people that I manage. We evolved. I had this thing, minimum amount time possible. I had an acronym for it. But it was a minimum amount of time to complete this requirement that HR says we need to do. And so what I would do is coach people up on, first you had to do your goal setting. So you set your goals, and I go, we got to pick some. So let's pick some,
Right.
and let's leave those bitches open ended.
How do you so in this on the topic of goals, how do you feel about and I'll just say I hate them, but how do you feel about goals that get cascaded down from the top and not changed? So somebody who's like 4 or 5 levels below a president or a CEO gets the same goals as everybody else.
I I don't believe they should be the same goals, but you should have a line of sight. I do believe this. Whether you use what is that, four scorecard, or some
The
mechanism,
force, yeah.
where you you should have a line of sight about how your contribution goes to the top.
Absolutely, but meaningful to you. And I've been in
Yeah, in your context.
including a certain company where my goals were exactly the same as the people above me, above them. And I would just put stuff in there because I like this is just kind of high level. Wasn't meaningful. So that's one of my gripes about performance reviews in the context of goals is that we don't they're not meaningful to people.
Yeah, and I did like it when our system for doing that
Oh,
Im- improved so that they opened it up so you there was a point in time where you could only edit the information in there once a year.
yeah. Oh, that's another one too.
You're
Like,
not going to
yeah,
have
thank you.
new
That's
ask,
helpful.
unforeseen ask come throughout the year. I just go, that's dumb. So what I would like to do is, I'm meeting with folks every week or every other week, depending on how much one-on-one time they like or need. And different people have different thresholds for that. And to make sure that we're capturing what they're doing well all throughout the year. So when it this minimum amount of time. So what we're doing is in our half hour one-on-ones, we're capturing that information all throughout the year. So when it comes
Right.
time to, you got to write your self review. Well, I've got it here. Let me just grab the email that summarizes or our,
Right.
I really loved OneNote for
Yeah,
Microsoft
same. Me too. Oh
for
God.
that kind of task
Yeah.
where you just go look back in time and go, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. What and one thing I did like that they added, what are two or three things could you use for meaningful improvement? I like how that was phrased because it's not two or three things you're bad at, because I'm very much into the I forget the oh, I should have had this right on the tip of my tongue. The strength finders. Thank you.
What is it called?
Thank you,
What is it?
brain. Strength finders.
Strength
So it's
finder.
based off Gallup poll about, you might have seen this thing. What do you have an opportunity to do meaningful work? Do you enjoy your job? Are you given ability to be successful? But also the other side of that is they have this survey that you can take where you can find out what all of your strengths are. You might not even be aware of what some of them are.
Yeah.
But I and so there's this approach where if you want overwhelming success in your career, listen up, kids. If you want overwhelming success in your career, you invest in strengths. You don't waste time on weaknesses unless they're debilitating. Yeah, you
I
have a
like
hard
it.
time keeping your hands off your coworkers, might want to work on that.
Right. That would be one.
You
That would be under
you have
the
a hard time
debilitating.
being tactful in a meeting in a professional setting, might want to work on
Right.
that. But otherwise, you bring strengths to the table.
Yeah.
Find out what those are, and then build on those. Because here's the thing: as you move up the food chain, the people that assemble talent around themselves don't need six people that look all the same.
Right.
They need six people that bring different strengths to the table or complementary strengths. So
100%, man. I am totally on board. You're like I generally judge a guest podcast with how many pages of notes that I take, and I'm quickly filling out my notepad here. So let me ask you this. There's just so much to unpack on performance reviews. I don't know. I know at the every place I've ever worked has had some sort of a rating system, right?
yeah.
So maybe you can give me some advice on that because I find them offensive and very subjective. And I get people who are fucking superstars giving themselves like a 3 out of 5 across the board. And I have sometimes I've had in the past people that are like, you're mediocre, like I'm a 5, and managers giving people, it's very subjective. So what are your thoughts on how we deal with ratings, Adam?
So the last organization I worked for, and this actually goes hand in glove into career advancement and this annual review.
Yep.
So what I really like, and the where an organization has a food chain, you've got your organizational hierarchy, but you have your your job skill family, and there's
Yes.
a hierarchy within that, and you could
Yes.
jump families and things of that nature. But what what I like is you've got a job skill family, and for each level, there's a description of the expectations of how you
Right.
perform at that level.
Correct. Yeah.
So for young people, this is what I coach them up. If they don't know how to have the conversation with their boss about what's it take to get a promotion around here, your organization might have already provided you the framework, because those job skill descriptions are the framework. And this is the same conversation I'd have with the people that were on my team. And by the way, I didn't learn this when I was newly minted as a manager. I like to think of myself as who is the Scott guy from Office, The
Michael
Office,
Scott. Michael Scott.
Michael Scott. I would describe my early attempts at leadership as a well-intended buffoon.
For sure.
So what
So
you do is you have this framework,
yep.
and then what I would say is you're at level X. Now there might be an expectation that it might take a certain amount of time for you to master that level. But one thing as your manager, because I'm thinking about your employee growth, and I don't think that you're going to work for me forever, which is where we work. There's some people that I'm super excited about this career success they've had, being able to watch them. And if I had the smallest amount of ability to contribute to that success from this sort of standpoint, that my expectation, you're not working for me forever.
Right.
Hopefully, if I've done my job as a manager correctly. So let's look at the next higher thing in your career path and what those expectations are. Now, when I set goals,
Right.
I want to make sure that you've had an opportunity to operate at the higher level, because kids that are listening, guess what? You don't get the next higher job because you're a nice person or deserving, or
Right.
you can't promise that you'll operate at that higher level and as soon as you get the promotion. No,
Right.
you have to demonstrate that you can operate at that higher level. Let me give you opportunities to work at that higher level. So now you have a framework for promotion, a framework for expectation settings. So now let's get to the rating, because I've had the same thing. I've had some knuckleheads that were not without talent. They certainly had talent, but in the rating system that we had, they would they consistently rank themselves as at the highest level
Right.
thing. So there was a lot of organizations has that. Does
Yes.
not meet expectations. It meets some,
Yep.
which meet some. The definition usually is, hey, you went above and beyond on some things.
Right.
Some things weren't up to the mark. Met expectations. You met or exceeded all expectations. So you might have actually kicked ass and took some names on a couple of facets of your job, but for the rest, you met expectations. Exceeds means you really exceeded in all facets of your job. And then there's I forget what the significantly exceeds. And for the
Yeah.
last organization I worked in, that
Outstanding.
that
Fantastic.
and so this is the other thing that I would say. Look, if you rank yourself as exceeds, that doesn't just go to me. That goes to the VP. If you rank yourself as significantly exceeds, that goes to the senior VP. So have some awareness
Well,
of.
I think with ratings too, part of it as you're talking, I still hate them and I'm not gonna like them because again, I've seen I've seen people get sorry, just swallowed my own spit. I've seen people get ratings. So at this last company that I was talking about in my hold on, I'm gonna take myself a so at this last company that I was talking about, there was a period of time, this was years ago, but I had to sit with all the team leads and we had to look at how we rated people. And it
Mhm.
was just fascinating to me. Not only did people rate themselves, there's just a great, very a wide spectrum of how people view themselves,
Mhm.
but also how managers rated their people. And I remember there was a one guy that I had worked with for many years, a big project that lasted like 3 years long, side by side every single day. And I just thought he was phenomenal. And I remember seeing how his manager rated him, and I was shocked. Now I don't know, maybe something happened. I was kind of still working with him, so nothing that I was aware of, but it just shocked me, and it occurred to me that, part of and I think part of it is the ratings are they're generally so high level, and they're generally not tied to you specifically, a person, your job and your framework of what you're looking for. They're just generic. How do you do on safety? I don't know. How the fuck does anybody do on safety? I wear my
Did you
seatbelt, so everybody always gets,
you didn't stab
unless
anybody, so that's good.
right. So and it just, so but I still, I don't know. I think ratings are kind of icky. Um, and
Icky,
yeah,
but
I think they're icky.
there.
I find it
So
offensive.
I've seen both sides of that coin.
Yeah.
So and in fact, when I was listening to your earlier podcast, this was the thing. I was like, I've been the person lower in the food chain,
Mhm.
first learning about this sort of facet of corporate life. And then I've also been a more senior person and learned the difference between doing it and then doing it well.
Well, and that's a key thing too, because one of my key loathes about performance reviews is I don't, as a part of the process, over the years, I mean, and even in one company, your process changes a bazillion times. So over the years, I've seen many flavors of the process for performance reviews, annual, quarterly, whatever. And never once has there ever been, as part of the process, I get to rate my boss. I get to give feedback on somebody above me on the food chain. Oh, my people that report to me don't get to, as part of the process, give feedback for me. And to me, that's the biggest gap of how performance reviews are run or at least my experience, because who better to give feedback on how I'm doing as a leader than the people that I lead. And I've not seen it, and I don't know
Yeah.
anybody. I'm
Well,
sure it
and
exists somewhere, but
I think HR would view that as a road fraught with peril.
of course they would. Well, but their HR is there to protect the company from the employees. So
Yes, from being sued. And so there is
no offense
that.
to HR people. I get it. Sometimes that's not your choice, but it
Yeah.
is.
So, well, and in fact, going back to that story about my brother, he got frustrated. So that was the primary reason why he left. And then that person in question, there was an early buyout to encourage people to retire or to leave
Hmm.
the company. And I was told by my boss, don't even think of applying for it because it'll get denied.
Well,
But this person, he was encouraged. You take the money. And what was the company doing? Just trying to avoid getting sued. Yeah.
funny
So,
story. I applied, when I went back. I worked for the company for 16 years. I left for a little over 5 years. I went back for 7 months, and then
oh, you did.
they had a separation program, and then I applied to it because everything was changing. My role was hey, come on back, but we're going to take your role away. Come on back to this great team, but you're not going to have the team anymore. So I said, okay, fuck it. I'm going. I was initially denied. And then because they said, well, you don't have enough time put in. And I said, look, I have 16 years put in. And they said, okay, you're right. You are eligible, but the period of time between when you leave a job and you come back cannot be more than 5 years. And for me, it was 5 years and 2 months. If it had been 2 months less, I could have gotten the
You got
voluntary
Beth,
separation.
the world revolves around rules.
I know, right?
You got it. You can't code a feeling.
Well, it's funny you said that you say that because you mentioned pension earlier when I don't think I ever told you this. When I left again after 7 months because it was such a shit show and my boss from my current job had contacted me and I was thank God, thank baby Jesus. And so I resigned and I said, because again, they took my job, they took my role away, they took my team away. Wouldn't tell me what my new role was. It was whatever it was going to be was going to be a demotion. So I said, you've made the decision for me to just not be here anymore. So I resigned, and all of a sudden I get these
Message
emails.
received.
Yeah, well, all of a sudden I start getting these emails from HR, and they're like, well, just does she know if she stays another 5 days to the end of the month, then she could get retirement benefits? And I said, what are you talking about? I resigned. I'm not, and they're like, no, you're 55. So I shouldn't even say that because now people know how old I am. You're 55. So
Beth, I had no idea.
yeah. I got one foot in retirement
You
too, Gary.
were very well, young lady.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, he says you're 55 and you have 10 years. So apparently now I've got time in with the company. If 10 years in the company, you must take your pension. So I had to go through the whole thing of like figuring it out, the whole
Free
pension
money.
thing. Yeah. But hey, you know what? But it just
You
was
send me a
weird.
check every month. I'm not going to bitch about it.
That's right. That's what I said.
Matter
Whatever.
of fact, I had a friend of mine in my prior company who also had worked for a utility, and he was the one that sat me down and said, "Hey, apply for early retirement." And I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you don't have to wait till you're 67 or
Mm-mm.
72 or whatever you want to do." He goes, "Take the money now. Do you think you could find something to do with that money that that would equal or exceed the return?" And I go, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
fair." Well, and the extra income monthly amount, because I'm not retired, I'm not Social Security retired. That's the
Right.
thing
Right.
looking at next. But the extra money coming in is what helped me, in the calculus of why I left my last employer and went to the job that I'm at now.
Amen, brother. Man, I'm telling you, I'm not knocking it. Hey, I want to go
I
back to
could do
something that
math.
oh,
But I did want to finish that
yeah,
conversation
go
on
ahead.
employee rankings because significantly exceeds. So I had a couple bananas that would do that. They had
Yeah.
super high
Oh yeah.
opinion
There's
of
always
their
one.
stuff, and I had people that uh, would put themselves at exceeds that were not. And so I actually had to I made a PowerPoint deck, and I went through and said, I go, okay, sort of like Toastmasters. Remember in Toastmasters, you would critique somebody's speech, but I
Yeah.
always say, they would say, you do the Oreo cookie method. You give them a compliment, give them an area to improve, and then another compliment. I go, same thing in employee reviews, by the way, works super helpful. But I go, but the milk, I go, you got to have cookies and milk. What's the
Right.
milk?
Yeah, what's the
It's
milk?
the context. The critique a senior level person receives is not the critique an entry level person
Right.
receives.
Yep.
So it's got to be super much in context. So I created a PowerPoint and went, here's the definition of each one of these rankings. Here's the context of how you're going to be judged. I go, because we've got a framework that we've all had conversation with about annual performance reviews and how I'm giving you an opportunity to work towards that. And by the way, I coached up all the leaders that reported to me that was my expectation of how they ran their teams too. And And then I said, so here's some basic stuff. There's operational things. You got to dot your I's and cross your T's. Easy stuff. Time cards on time. You don't blow your budget. And if you owe me a deliverable, that sucker's on time. Those are the basics. That's meats. And I go, if you miss on any of those three, do not come to me with your exceeds. And
Yeah.
you better not come to me with your significantly exceeds. Like I had a couple bananas, I had somebody, both blow a deliverable and a budget and come to me with,
It's just so funny though, because
planet are you on? Get out of here.
it's trying to get into the mind, because I rate myself too, and I tend to be a little bit like low, because I always think no matter what, I always have something to learn, and so I tend to be a little bit but I think the hard thing for me is work is so much more than a definition. I mean, that it has to be there. That's the foundation. But then you have people that think and I've done it myself. I have dealt with so much shit this year. I don't care how I performed on it. I should get a fucking exceeds, because I had to deal with, the bullshit, right?
Well, and that should be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Environment you
So I
work
say
in.
it's just so hard. It's so subjective.
Yeah. So, and I used to call it the three-legged stool of employee retention too.
Yeah.
You got to have a and it's a sliding scale, right? You need a boss that's not an asshole. You can have an amazing boss. Your
Primarily. Yeah.
boss just can't be an asshole.
Yeah.
You need to be, you know, compensated,
Right.
and I mean, do you need to be paid the best? No, but you need to have an opportunity to do interesting work. The thing is those three are some of like the three main variables. There's a couple other things at play. You could have a regulatory thing. You could have a policy come down and just people just go, nope. But those three things are sort of like the main things, and they all slide and work together. And I was actually working on an Excel thing where you could slide one and it would let you know how far you could go with the other ones. So you could have an amazing boss and do great work, and you might put up with not being compensated.
Do you find that for you, as you get, as you got into your middle years, that the money, and especially in an industry, in a job role that probably, I'm assuming, pays pretty well, like I mean, IT just pays pretty well. Do you find that as you grow older, the money's far less important than fulfillment and doing things that feeling like you made a difference, or whatever it is that makes your cup fill up?
That was part of it. That was part of why I went to work for the last organization. I did, it was a nonprofit. I did like the sense that at the end of the day, you were making the world a better place. It was interesting. So I've been blessed. I've been compensated super well, been able to provide for my family. And you think about, we don't have the time to go into the road that I've been on since I was a kid, to where I've landed.
We'll do that on the next show.
Yeah. So, just a remarkable journey. And we could talk about life's lessons that I've learned on that facet of it. So what was interesting is the money became less of a, after I had reached sort of that, you go, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, roof, food, that sort of thing. Yeah, there was a certain facet of that where the money was not, well, so you have different personality types. That's a whole another discussion. So I am intrinsically motivated, where some people are extrinsically motivated. They need a visible carrot. I've always been internally motivated. So the money less so, except for what the money represented, if that makes sense. So when I became a program manager or a senior program manager, I was getting compensated commensurate with those levels.
Yeah.
They could have given me zero additional dollars, and my level of comfort and be able to provide for my family would have been unchanged. But there is a, it goes hand in glove sort of with the responsibility that you're given. That's in the absence of all other indicators. I think, that sort of kind of goes with it. So
So this is why I didn't have kids, because then it made it just easier for me. But I get what you're saying. I mean, there was a point where I think that when I first hit six figures, it was like, oh, yeah, like,
yeah.
not that I should but there is a great
Oh, I'm there with you. I remember
it's like, whoa,
one of
yeah,
our colleagues would often talk about when she came to the organization, she was already there. And I was like Craig from South Park. If I could have six-figure salary, I'd be so happy.
Oh well, shit. When I first got my job, my very first career job, and my starting salary was 42,000, and I thought, oh my God, that's a lot of money. Um,
When
but
I went to work for Boeing for my first job, they wanted me so bad that I dropped out of my undergrad to go do it. I finished school later, and all my co-workers and this new situation that had been set up are bitching about how much taxes, and they're like, Jerry, you're not saying anything. I go, I paid more in taxes than I made last year. You're not going to hear a peep out of me.
I yeah, there's a great TED Talk out there where somebody had done some research, and it's probably the actual numbers probably changed a little because I think it's maybe 10 years old. But they said the research that they did was that for people in, like United States, I'm sure it doesn't apply to everywhere, but or whatever advanced, I even hate that word, but in the United States, your happiness will increase as your salary increases, as your what you earn per year increases to a point, and then it stops. And it's
Yeah.
really probably because, and I think it's something, it was like, I think it was 70,000, but it's probably, 80 or 90 now. But there's a point where, yes, because you're now, the average person is now able to better provide, but then there comes a point where it doesn't make you happier. So
Yeah.
you can go as high as you want, but
Standard of
that
living in the
sweet
United
spot is,
States, yeah, has never been higher.
it's just interesting.
If you cannot be happy with what I saw the saying, and I 100% agree with it. If you cannot be happy with what you have today, giving you more money will not
100%.
solve it.
Yeah. So I know we're getting on time, and
I know, and we
we'll
have
have to
so
do
many
I
more
know
things to talk about.
we'll have to do a second show, but I want to wrap up with performance reviews because let me ask you this. What, because I'm asking this because I honestly don't know. This is boggling my mind. What are they used for? How are those used? Because
Oh, yes.
oftentimes your merit's already set or already
No, no.
oh yes. Oh yes. Sometimes it is. In that place, it was definitely,
Oh, that was not my experience.
yeah, that was my experience. So maybe
Okay.
year to year
That
it would vary, but that would
that's unfortunate because
yeah,
the performance review is supposed to go first. And
100%. Yeah.
then what you do is you have a bucket of money. But fun fact, when I worked for Boeing, first program I ever wrote, because I got tired of my listening to my boss behind a closed door bitching over his pad of paper, trying to calculate merit raises for everybody based on
How do
a
we do long
bucket
division
of
again?
money, and how if he gave this person 3% and that person 2%, and he's in there with his calculator cussing and wrecking a pencil. I was like, oh my God, I'm writing this dude a spreadsheet.
So you wrote a
Anyway,
program to help him with that?
yeah, so it was my first program that was distributed throughout our division at Boeing. Anyway, yeah, performance review is supposed to go first, and then what you do is you have a bucket of money, and then you go, okay, the person that kicked ass and took names, so you get a bucket of money. That's the thing. So some people might not realize you get a bucket of money.
Yeah, yeah,
The
I knew
bucket
that.
cannot. It takes special approval to go on high to get more money in that bucket. some organizations have a mechanism to make that happen. If you're wondering, ask your boss. They might not know. I
Yeah.
was a boss for a long time before I found out, oh, if you got somebody that's like way outside of the sort of the framework, you can go get extra money that doesn't come out of the merit pool. So then you go, my best performers getting a 4% raise. So you go, exceeds expectations, they get the biggest raises. Meets expectations, smaller raise. And so we were, my last organization, raise and a bonus, and you could decide. And so you played with those monies and dollars until the money was gone. And I wanted to make sure I used every dollar in my bucket to give
Right. Oh
people as
yeah.
much money as they could.
Down to the dollar.
Now, the last place we had this rule, if you were meet some, no raise allowed. And you had to have a story about why that person's not going on a performance improvement plan.
Yeah.
And I had a person that I was like, you know what? I think this dude just had a bad year. I don't want to put him on a PIP. I think I could coach him up. I go, some of the people that were complaining about him, I go, I don't think we're being 100% honest about the situation. So some of the things that you heard, this was my boss,
Yep.
were not necessarily there. But then we had another year where there were other issues, and I go, PIP. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
PIP. But yeah, so people may not realize, and those rules are pretty common across a lot of industry.
Yeah, I don't discount that. I will say 13 years that I've been I'm not even gonna say manager because it's really a team lead position, but being privy to how it goes on, I can tell you that in 3 of those years, I agree with you. Yes, there were merits after performance reviews. In a few of those years I don't know, but I can tell you in at least a handful of those years I know definitively, in more than one place that I've worked, that they merits were already determined before performance reviews were finalized or even completed. So
Yeah, that's
yep. Well, this has been
yeah,
so
that's
like
a red.
so
We call that, we kids in the industry, we call that a red flag.
youngins. What do we call that?
A red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know
Yeah.
what?
Start update your resume if you get
Someday
wind.
when you and I are both in retirement, we'll have a very intimate and open conversation about all the red flags that we had at certain companies, and
Oh, yeah.
can feel confident about that. But meanwhile, Jerry Great, you're like just so genuine. I love talking to you. I will tell you this. I don't know if I ever told you, but when I published my book, Where the Hell is My Bacon, which is all about corporate bullshit, but also bacon, you sent me a little note in LinkedIn. You were just congratulating me. You were happy for me. And you said that I keep this on my vision board because it is so meaningful.
What?
So just so you know how you touch people when you say, I don't know if I ever shared this with you. This goes back to when I think we were still both at shitty place. I had told my wife, probably after a Toastmasters meeting, if I ever have enough money to start a magazine or something like that, I know who I would pay to write for it. Beth Campbell. There is no greater compliment to someone than saying that. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here. For our audience, I cannot get off the call without saying Jerry Gray's alter ego, Jake Gray, is an amazing musician, singer, songwriter. Look him up. Where can people find you if people want to reach out and go, hey, tell me more about leadership, or no, I just want to hear your songs that make Beth Campbell cry?
Oh,
I'm a horrible titleist, but you have the one about the wedding, and you have Michigan Memories, and oh my God, you're awesome.
yeah. So yeah, my musical alter ego is Jake Gray, and there's a story behind that. We can go into it another time. But yeah, I'm on the Spotify's, the iTunes, the Amazons, the YouTubes. YouTube has really made some moves in the music streaming because you don't have to pay for a
Right.
membership. You can
I love
the
YouTube.
music just goes there and you can download an album. So you just on YouTube, you just look me up, Jake Gray, American poet, to distinguish from all the false Jake Grays.
It's
But
a very common name, I will tell you. It is a very
Spotify. So yeah, Spotify. If you look for American Poet, my latest album is called Road Hard for
love it.
various obvious reasons.
Your
But
production of your music, I will, because I have all of your stuff, and I have like a bazillion, literally a bazillion songs of all yoga music to, B-52s to whatever disco.
love me some 52s.
Yeah, I know, right? And I will be shuffling like on a long trip, and I'll just be like, zoning out, and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, I'll just a few notes will come on. I'm like, the production is amazing.
Oh,
It's just in addition to your great songwriting.
thanks. I
I
appreciate it.
We have got to do a whole episode because you kind of personify, grit. I know I talk a lot about corporate stuff, but I also am trying to talk just about just grit. And you're a great example of somebody who you found, at least as far as I could tell, you found that you went after something that you had passion for, and you were not a 20-year-old when you got this kind of success, right? You're being played on the radio and shit. I mean, you're like the
Sometimes
most famous person I know.
I like to say I've made dozens of dollars in the music business.
That's what I say about my book too. Well, but it's still, I think it's
I
a
made
great.
I made dozens of dollars on my book too.
I think it's a great, you're a great example of grit, in that old saying of you're never too old. So you are,
Well,
you know,
go do what you enjoy. Life's short, and it's not a spectator sport. So
absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. And part of the Cafe Grit and being in the grit seat. Really appreciate it. And your insight into the world of corporate bullshit, and also some really good advice, which I appreciate your speaking to the youngins, because I do sometimes I'm so old and jaded, sometimes I forget about them. But and thank you everybody out there for listening. Give us both some love if you enjoyed the show. Otherwise, I appreciate all of you. Hang on, be strong, and remember, you are a fucking badass. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Take it easy. Hey everybody, thank you for stopping by Cafe Grit, where the moxie is fresh, the passion cold brewed, and everything is served with a heaping side of mojo. For more Cafe Grit episodes, please check out bethannecampbell.com/Cafe Grit. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving it a rating or review on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or your favorite streaming platform. I'll be forever grateful, and in return, I'll wish upon you copious amounts of bacon, your favorite hot beverage, and of course, pie. I'd love to connect and hear about your grit experiences as well. Please go to bethannecampbell.com for links to all my social media. Cafe Grit is a product of Beth Anne Campbell, LLC, all rights reserved. Thanks again, and remember, you are a badass. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Take it easy.